Hi, I'm Paul Bechwith with the University of Ottawa Laboratory for Paleoclimatology. Just last night, Fort McMurray in Alberta, or Fort Mac for short, suffered an inferno. The surrounding woods caught fire. The fires jumped across roads and went into the town, and it destroyed many structures, and the entire town of 80,000 people had to be evacuated. Now, there's two ways to look at this tragedy. One is, fires happen, it's just a tragic thing. But that really ignores the big picture. And the big picture is that we're undergoing abrupt climate change right now, globally, and we need to declare a climate change emergency. And the incineration of Fort McMurray is just one other incident in the climate casino of a town dropping because of climate events from abrupt climate change. So basically overnight, 80,000 people were evacuated. So Canada suddenly has 80,000 climate refugees from Alberta. We've taken in a lot of refugees from Syria, and those are climate refugees because there was a drought in that country from 2006 through 2010, the worst drought in their history, and it took away the livelihoods of 1.5 million farmers who moved to rural areas. There were no jobs, and the city basically started collapsing as a result of that. We need to connect the dots. We need to look at the big picture of things. We are in a global climate emergency. So what happened in Fort Mac is basically temperatures in the last little while have been in the low 30 degrees Celsius, which for early May is unheard of. So these high temperatures combined with lack of rainfall have put tremendous stress on the surrounding vegetation in the region. What is ironic, of course, is that Fort McMurray houses all of the workers for the Alberta oil sands, which is the single most most polluting project as far as climate change is concerned. The oil from the tar sands takes tremendous amounts of energy to extract and causes tremendous amounts of greenhouse gases. So this is all part of a larger changing climate system, and we've definitely got into an abrupt mode. Greenhouse gases like CO2 and methane and nitrous oxide are increasing exponentially. In fact, in 2015, the CO2 level rose 3.05 parts per million, which is the largest ever. We're supposedly reducing fossil fuel emissions around the planet, but what is key, what is important is the CO2 levels in the atmosphere, and those are still rising exponentially, as are methane. So what has basically happened is that we've changed the chemistry of the atmosphere and the oceans with our emissions. We've caused a warming of the planet, but the Earth is a heat engine that absorbs energy. It's heated by solar energy, and that heat is distributed around the planet. The equator, of course, is much warmer than the poles, but the poles are mostly, like for example, the Arctic is covered with snow for large parts of the year, and the sea ice covers the Arctic Ocean. These are very light surfaces which reflect a lot of solar radiation, which keeps those regions cold. But now, because of the loss of sea ice and snow cover, the region is darkening, absorbing more and more solar radiation and heating up. So the temperature difference to the equator is greatly reduced, and that is what is responsible for setting up the jet streams which drive weather patterns around the planet. So what's happened in Fort Mac is it's in a blocking pattern, a blocking ridge. So it's extremely high temperatures, extremely dry. This has caused great stress on the vegetation, drying it out. Not only that, but the trees have been stressed for many years because of the pine beetle, because of the emerald ash borer, and because of other creatures that damage the trees that used to be killed off in cold winters and no longer are because of climate change. So we need to keep the climate system in perspective, in mind, because these events like Fort McMurray succumbing to fire, just a few weeks ago, it was Houston that was completely flooded out. You know, the center of the oil industry and a large part of the oil industry in the US was flooded out. These events are happening more and more frequently with more and more severity. And this is only the tip of the iceberg, the proverbial iceberg, because things are going to ramp up and accelerate at much, much higher rates as we move forward. There is a real and present danger of losing Arctic sea ice this summer. If we lose Arctic sea ice by September and we have this first blue ocean event, then these weather patterns, the jet stream patterns, will fracture more. We'll have more ridges and troughs, more extreme weather events around the planet. And fires is just one aspect of these extreme weather events. So the Earth systems are being severely stressed. The largest ecosystem on the planet, the Great Barrier Reef in California, basically suffered a massive bleaching event this year, and lots of that coral will die. Look deeper, 25% of all the fish in the ocean spend part of their lifestyle on coral reefs. With dead coral reefs, how will these fish survive? What's in the cards is a collapse of the entire marine food chain. A paper just came out last week talking about oxygen levels in the ocean. And because the oceans are warming and stratifying, and there's less mixing in the vertical direction, so oxygen from the surface is not getting down into deeper waters, and this is putting great stress on the fish. So as tragic as Fort McMurray is, as tragic as the fire there is, we're seeing fire outbreaks around the world. How many Canadians know of the massive fires that have been ongoing in the Himalayas for the last month? And they don't have any water there to put out those fires. And those fires are because the temperatures are extreme, it's extremely warm.